Understanding art is a process that helps people of different cultures come together to learn how to appreciate one another. It's in a way a starting point on display to a conversation of diverse views and opinions of how people who may share the same space can live in the same communities, but yet through their lens perceive a much different reality. I had an opportunity to speak with Sean Hoodye, law enforcement professional and artist, whose artwork encourages people to look beyond their own cultures, perceptions, and realities to discover common ground through empathy and acknowledgement of common challenges. Sean Hoodye, I want to thank you so much for having me this afternoon at the Walt Girdner Photo Gallery and Art Studio. I've known you for
Eons.
ever.
Since you were a teenager.
Yeah, wanting to be in law enforcement and immerse myself in the law enforcement culture. I met you as a law enforcement professional. And, one of the things I didn't know was that you are a very talented artist. I've only recently found out a couple of years ago, and I was really impressed with some of your artwork, especially what I got to see this month. So, tell us about yourself. Tell us what you're about.
I've been in law enforcement for 30 years, but I've been an artist since before I was black. Like it's what I've always done. It is what I will always do.
Awesome. Yeah. So, you talk about, how long you've been an artist. Tell, when it comes to being an artist, what does art do for you? Because, art in and of itself, as I like to see it, is like the seen part of culture, right? When we think about culture diversity and what makes us different, artwork itself is something that you can look at it, you can see that it has some type of significance in someone's culture, but it's not until you talk to the artist that it actually gives meaning. It actually provides meaning. So tell us, what does art do for you?
For me, art is the way I breathe. Because I've always been an artist, it is the largest part of me. Whether as a family man, I'm married, I have 2 kids, and as a law enforcement officer for over 30 years, I've been an artist forever. So that is the largest part of me. If I didn't do that, it'd probably be not very fun to be around because it is what I do. It is the art that allows me to speak in different ways to different people. That's one of the beauties of art, is that you get a chance to engage with people that you never even talk to. Just because they see your work and they get a basic idea. Along with that, they also have their own ideas of what it means kind of infused into it. So it's a great conversation. They infuse some of them while trying to take in maybe some of what you've done. So without even knowing it, there's this bond and there's this conversation, without even speaking, that's actually occurred. So it's super cool.
And I like to think that it's not just a conversation between you and the artist, but it's a conversation with yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you talk about these different styles of paintings that you create, and one of the ones some of the ones that I've noticed are very they're social conversations that people are having, and so I want to take a moment to ask that you highlight some of those paintings because there's a bit of a misconception with some in society that seem to believe that law enforcement officers don't have these conversations at their dinner tables about some of the things that are going on in our societies and in the communities that we serve. Not just how we feel about things and what's going on with our fellow colleagues, but how our residents feel, the people that we serve. How are they feeling about all of the some of the challenges in certain communities? So what are some of the paintings that you want to highlight that you find to be significant to some of those social challenges that we face as a whole, as human beings?
Right. There are several actually. I have Bloodied but Unbeaten. It's part fighter, but also part law enforcement officer. Getting bloodied up, but yet we are unbeaten. And it's just the idea of tenacity, and we just kind of keep going. I have pictures of homeless that I've done. A lot of times with homeless people, anybody who's a little different, anybody who's quote unquote outside the margins, whether they're morbidly obese and seen as being maybe a little different, odd, for some people gross, whatever it is. If you have something on your face, different things that people look at and see you as different. That picture and that poem that I wrote has to do with the idea of just people just simply want to be seen, they want to be acknowledged, and they want to be respected. One of the things that I notice with people like that is generally when people walk around, especially with homeless people, they will not engage them. They will not look them in the eye. And that's unfortunate. Even if you don't want to give a person anything, the least you could do is show them that respect and at least say no to their face. Look them in the eyes like a human being and either say yes or no and keep about your way. I think that's important to treat people like human beings.
I think that's very vital because as we talked about earlier, it's important that people feel acknowledged. Right. People feel validated. You know, just because you don't look at a person in the eye doesn't mean that they don't exist. Right? We think that if we don't look at them in the eye that they will just somehow disappear or they won't ask you for change, you know? But at the end of the day, people want to feel that they want to feel acknowledged. They want to feel like they have a purpose on this earth and that they do exist in the world. So
a lot of times when we don't acknowledge other people, it has to do more with us than with them. There's something within us that we have an issue with. Yeah. And that's the problem, as opposed to and we see something in that person that we choose not to focus on within ourselves. It's unfortunate.
And so along those lines of some of those social issues that you highlight in some of your paintings, this month you unveiled a painting that I found to be very profound. And when I see this painting, I can tell you that most people, when they see this painting, on its onset, people already have a general ideal or thought as to the meaning behind it. One would assume that the painting that we're looking at is something that is anti-law enforcement or something that's denouncing law enforcement. It's not until you actually hear from the artist himself, that you get not just a better understanding of what that painting means, which is in a way a bit of a paradigm shift. But it also opens up the conversation of some of the implicit biases and some of the notions that we have, some of these quick to jump stereotypes or ideals that we have. So tell us about that painting. What is the name of that painting and what does that painting signify?
So the name of that painting is actually called Endangered Species. But with me, with all my paintings, I always have two names. So there's Endangered Species and then there's the AKA, which is the murder of St. Michael. In that painting, you have a bunch of different things. There are about 12 to 13 different views and different photos. I use different styles to kind of capture each one individually. And there's a centralized theme, and ultimately it just has to do with us as law enforcement, what we've been dealing with. I didn't realize, it's funny, until probably about a couple weeks before the show that I'd been working on that painting for about 5 years. But it was in different ways. There were little pictures here and there that had drawn out different things that I was working on in my head, and it kind of root system shot off to other paintings. But it's something that I've been working on mentally for a very long time, and it just kind of, once I started it, I just couldn't stop. When I say I couldn't stop, it was a labor of pain and love at the same time. I would start it, and it would get heavy. It would get very deep, and I'd have to put it to the side. I'd start working on something else, bring it back out, and it's usually when something annoyed me, when something I saw in the news or something happened in law enforcement. But it really ultimately has to do with all the things that we've just been burdened with, and that level of frustration. And there are actually individuals in that painting that I know because I trained them. And so to see them like that when they were attacked and when they were shot for no apparent reason, and it was actually that particular incident of these particular officers being shot that was the finishing product. I had basically started working on the painting, drew it all out, started adding some color, but I kept whiting out and erasing, if you will, like certain parts. But it wasn't until that happened that I realized that, okay, now this painting is basically finished. And I stuck them in there, and then I was able to kind of continue pretty much smoothly and fluidly for the next year. Still doing other pieces in between.
So would you say that this painting that you mastered it's evolving? It's I kind of, the way I look at that painting as you're describing is like it's a evolution of things occurring. It's like a living and breathing painting. Would that be a safe way of?
Yeah, it's constant. I could take certain things out of that painting, and there are things that just happened a couple of weeks ago that I could take and shove in there, and they would still have the same type of impact. There are attacks from New York, officers being attacked, attacks from overseas, And officers being tagged and people constantly just viewing them and taping them with their phones as if it's some sort of sideshow. So these are the kind of things that we've been burdened with. And then in the middle is just that level of frustration. You see a big blue face, and it's just that screaming frustration. You don't know what else to say or how to feel. It's just that raw frustration that we in law enforcement are feeling.
So, and not just that painting, but just your paintings overall, how do you think that the work that you do, especially with the fact that you can relate to law enforcement officers and what they're experiencing, what they're going through, how do you think that art in general, even with the artwork that you do, how can that help law enforcement officers cope with some of these very severe shocks to conscience types of experiences that they're having? How do you think your artwork helps law enforcement officers cope with that?
Just kind of like the other painting or the other drawing, you're seen. You know that there's someone out there who sees you, and they see you in a way that brings others in who aren't in the same career field. A lot of times when we see law enforcement paintings, and I don't mean this to be disrespectful, a lot of them are kind of corny. It's a very generic kind of a corny, and they're made specifically for law enforcement. It's geared for one group, for one demographic. That's unfortunate, because the average person will see that not feel the same way about it, so they don't acknowledge it. They don't really look and see what it is. And it may be a phenomenal piece of artwork, but for them, they don't see it because it doesn't resonate with them.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's they're not a stakeholder in the final product.
Exactly. Well, the art I do and the art I try to make, I try to bring everybody in. One of the reasons why this piece doesn't have a price tag on it is because I'd like to put it in the museum. I don't want it to be just for cops, because cops already know. They felt these things. They've seen these. They already know. I want it to be seen by other people so that they can have those aha moments. One of my son's friends, who was very much on the other side, the kind of rah-rah and Black Lives Matter and all these other different things that were very anti-law enforcement, saw that painting and told my son, wow, now I see things a little differently. It gave her a new perspective. And that's what I want. I want that dialogue. I want that conversation. You don't have to think the way I do. I don't want you to. Because if you do, then we can't really speak and learn anything if you think the same way I do. But at least having conversations allows me to see how you feel. It allows you to see how I feel. And then we've bonded. Which is most important. A good conversation.
One of the things I appreciate about you describing your efforts is this ideal of wanting to bring people together. We are in society having these conversations about these buzz phrases like inclusion and empathy and equity and equality, right? And but when we're having those conversations, many times it's conversations that are talking about opposite polarized thoughts of view.
Exclusion.
Yeah, inclusion becomes a conversation of exclusion. What makes me different? What sets me apart from you, right? So do you agree that your paintings actually bring people together? I mean, some of them we look at them and it's like, wow, there's a lot going on. But it's safe to say that these paintings it brings people together in the same room to talk about common challenges. And bringing people together to talk about those common challenges, we find so much that we have in common with one another.
Levels of commonality are necessary for the longevity of any type of relationship. At some point in time, I have to know that I have things in common with you. Because we're in a space right now where I don't necessarily respect other things or things different about you. So at least let me try to have some things in common. And then once we see our commonality, well, then I can respect the differences between us. But there's so much commonality, and we just don't realize it. We don't see it, we refuse to see it, especially nowadays. So with the paintings, I try to get people to see that. Most of the paintings that you'll see, like the eyes are very intense. The eyes are the gateway of the soul. Everybody understands that that's a level of commonality. And when you engage somebody in the eyes, whether it's an animal or a person, you get something from that. There's that level of commonality. And that's what I try to do. I try to make you engage. And in the process of engagement, you see a bit of yourself. And then hopefully you see then a bit of that other thing. You know, that reflection almost kind of helps you see deeper into that other thing.
It is said that visual art is an experience consciously created through an expression of skill or imagination. For some, like Sean, one does not need imagination, but instead a simple memory of life events. No matter one's perspective of those events, art facilitates a way of reminding us that despite our differences, we are all connected. The one constant thing we cannot change, reverse, or divide.